Well, Utah fans, we were certainly promised a splash sometime this weekend, and boy, has the Utah Hockey Club made a splash during this draft weekend. We'll talk about it on today's episode of Locked On Utah Hockey Club.
You are Locked On Utah Hockey Club, your daily podcast on the Utah Hockey Club, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome to the show, everybody. This is Locked On Utah Hockey Club, your number one daily podcast on the Utah Hockey Club. I am your host, Robyn Leonio, alongside Tom Callahan. We want to thank everyone for making this show your first listen every day. We're free and available everywhere you get your shows. We got a very special Saturday episode. We really don't do much, very few weekend episodes, Tom, but we're coming just down from draft weekend yesterday and today, so we might as well say, hey, let's get into some topics, Tom. Before we get into the actual picks that Utah made, very well needs to be discussed, but there was a big splash that Utah did make. Bill Armstrong made some big trades, a couple of big trades that brought in some big name defensemen on over to Salt Lake City.
Okay, my excitement exists on several levels right now. Okay, we're going to start with excitement number one for our YouTube viewers. Did you notice our nice, beautiful new blue slide here? This looks awesome, right? This is fantastic. So please have a look on YouTube. I love it. I love the new colors. Number two, we have a new voiceover in the beginning. We have a female voice introducing us now, which is different from what we've had in the past. So that's a change too. So we're stepping up in the world. We're making changes. Number three, holy cow, Utah Hockey Club. I was really wondering, and now this is telling. Bill Armstrong comes in, and I was wondering a couple of things. Number one, of course, what color suits are they going to wear and ties? We found out the answer to that was black with blue ties, white shirts. Okay.
Simple.
That's yes. And it's a power move, right? Everybody wears the same thing. It looks good. I like that.
Yeah.
But so now the question for me was coming into this draft is not even so much who they were going to pick. And I don't want to say that doesn't matter because it certainly does. Mm-hmm. But how are they going to maneuver themselves around coming in with the most picks of anybody in the league and a ton of draft or a ton of cap space into this draft and be able to do some maneuvering? We got our answers on those extremely quickly this weekend. Number one, Bill Armstrong is flat out going for it. I didn't expect that. Mm-hmm. But if you're a Utah hockey fan, you're excited now. And the other thing that tells me is that the ownership has said, Bill, go for it. And he never had that green light.
No.
He's got the green light now.
He was essentially giving a blank check. He's like, go ahead, spend the money.
This is crazy. And spend it responsibly.
Of course.
Don't spend just to spend. And it's amazing to see that all of a sudden, just, it's pedal to the metal now for Utah. They did more than I think anybody else did this weekend. They got better than any other team got this weekend. They improved faster. We haven't even hit free agency yet. And I've got thoughts about that, but we'll worry about it later. But man, this draft could not have gone better for me. Observing this Utah team could not have gone.
Yeah, with the draft and of course the trades that they made during draft weekend. And again, we'll get the overarching on the drafts, but I want to talk about the trades really quick, Tom. And
yes,
and more specifically, let's start with the biggest one, what we consider the blockbuster. Two big ones, but the blockbuster, I think the one everyone wants to hear about first, is in a trade with the Tampa Bay Lightning that sent over to Tampa Bay J.J. Mosier, Connor Geekie, a 2025 second-round draft pick that was originally Toronto's, and then the 199th pick from this year's draft. So we just recently happened. But coming on over to Utah, big man defenseman Mikhail Sergachev, Tom, and it made, honestly, it makes sense on both levels. The reason why both these teams would make the trade. I know Tampa needs to open their cap space. They don't have any, but Utah, they didn't have any defenseman, top defenseman. We were wondering, who are they going to get as a top pair defenseman? Well, there's your answer.
Yes. And Sergachev is a stud. And here are all the things I like about this. Number one, he's 26. Number two, he has term in his contract already. We don't have to worry about that. We know what he's getting paid for how long. A little bit better than half point a game, which is great from the D spot. He did miss time this year. I know it was a knee injury, and I know that can be a little bit of a question mark. This, by the way, Tampa Bay unloaded a couple of other things. There's two rumors going about Tampa Bay, which I'll only drop this once and we're moving on. But I hear that they're number one, and it's been reported they might have trouble reaching a deal with Stamkos. Maybe they're freeing up some extra money for Stamkos, but Jake Gensel is hotly rumored on the Tampa Bay front. So we know Tampa Bay every year has to make adjustments like this. This is what Chicago had to go through. They had to keep getting rid of good players because they had to continue making room under the cap. So Utah strikes. Boom, cap space, right? Weaponize that cap space. This is exactly what they did with this trade. They improved tremendously on the blue line. They get a number one, and they get a young guy who's going to jump in, make an impact in the long term. Tampa got what it needed. It got some younger guys, some less expensive guys. They got some draft capital. Great. But all of a sudden, there's a number one on the blue line in Utah, and you haven't even hit free agency yet. And you know what? Sergachev already has a cup. You know, he's got that experience under him. He's got 7 years left on his deal, so you have cost certainty with him. There's nothing not to like about this.
No, there really is nothing. I mean, the only thing is that I will say, and if you are a remnant, holding over from the Arizona Coyotes days, maybe you might have really loved the potential that JJ Mosier held. JJ Mosier is even younger, has the potential to be a good defenseman, but we can only see a limited amount based off the team that he was on. Let's be real. The Coyotes were not a good team. And then moving away from Connor Geekie, he was a first round draft pick just a couple years ago in the same draft that Logan Cooley came in from. Kind of didn't develop in the way people kind of expected in the last couple of years. So it's okay. We're willing to depart with that, but honestly, it could have been a little too soon. People are maybe a little bit too upset, but I think the cost, those two players for a guy like Mikhail Sergachev is certainly worth it.
And you know what? Of all the guys that went, Geekie is probably the one where I'm the saddest to lose him.
Mm-hmm.
But let me say this. I have watched teams in the NHL trade on potential with guys for years, and I have seen players continually and routinely get second, third, fourth, fifth, sixth chances into their late 20s, maybe even early 30s if they stick around that long, but by then they're journeymen, but they're like, wow, he's still got some potential. Remember that one time he had 60 points? No, nobody remembers that anymore. And I'm not saying that Geekie is going to be that guy. He could move on and find himself popped on the top line. I don't know, in Tampa Bay, something weird could have happened, and out of camp, all of a sudden he's got chemistry. We don't know, but I do know that for Utah Hockey Club, they're okay up front.
Yeah,
they're going to be just fine.
I will add one more thing on Geekie too. Is one of the reasons why he was super excited and to sign with and get drafted by the Arizona Coyotes at the time, because he loved the hot weather. He wanted to be down there because I remember media was talking to him back in one of the training camps, and it was 110 degrees in Scottsdale. It's like, oh my God, I love this. And I'm like, are you insane?
Right. Even everybody in Scottsdale is like, what's wrong with you, man?
And maybe there was a discussion too that when the move to Utah was happening, he's like, well, I want to go to a place where it's hot again. So just going to Tampa only made sense.
Robyn, you just reminded me of something. Speaking of which, this is the other thing I want to point out, Utah fans, and another reason for you to be so darn excited about what happened here today. Both Sergachev and the guy we're going to talk about next here in a moment, both had to waive no trade, no movement clauses to come to Utah. That is significant because as Arizona, with, I'll go ahead and say it, the old ownership, the old situation, the old arena, probably wouldn't happen.
Yep.
But now in Utah, with a new ownership group, the chains have been removed. They are going for it. And now you have guys waiving no trade clauses to allow themselves to be traded to Utah. That is significant.
It really is. And and if you are a Utah fan, that gives you all the more reason to be excited for your team and to be really looking forward to what's coming up in just this next year, because they are really making a push to be competitive again. Because and that Tom goes into what they did with their second trade. It happened pretty darn quickly after they made their first trade, where this was a deal with the New Jersey Devils that going over to New Jersey was their 49th pick. So it happened kind of when that 49th pick was up, and another 2025 second round pick. That's Utah's own second round pick in next year's draft. Coming on over was pick 153. So they kind of added that one on. And John Marino,
27. So we're not getting older. We're staying, and we talked about, Robyn, all summer how defensemen tend to evolve and get better into their late 20s, early 30s.
That gets right in their prime, right there.
Exactly, and he's already 6 years into his career. Again, a bigger guy. Didn't have a ton of points, but wasn't bad either. I mean, 25 points, 75 games, not bad. A third of a point a game. Block some shots, and I think this is a guy that is in your middle section of your six, right? He's potentially a good 3-4, depending on how the chemistry works, and of course, depending on who they come out of free agency with, how all the D pair are going to shake out. We'll find out. But man, I really like Marino. He's not setting anyone's hair on fire, but good. Not every defenseman needs to. You don't always need 6 Erik Karlssons. There's only one puck. And it's more important to have guys who can play defense on defense. But again, size, strength, that's been the MO here for Bill Anderson. And he opted to pick up 2 now current NHL players. That's the other thing that's important, is you can draft the guy, wherever. It doesn't ever mean they're going to pan out. I've seen first round draft picks who never ever play in the NHL. There's no guarantee. These guys are already bona fide NHLers.
You're right. And you did remind me of one thing. It's really interesting because I was watching the NHL Network broadcast, and it was shortly after, maybe a little bit after those trades were made. They sat down with Bill Armstrong and they were like, "Okay, here's the deal. What was going through your head when you made these deals and everything?" He said a couple things. I can't remember. There's a decent amount. I can't say, of course, every single word he said. I'm going to give out one thing that keep in mind, that based on what you just said, Tom, and it's, we have plenty of guys who can score, but what we need right now is some guys who can play defense. And that's kind of what, and Sergachev sure can be that guy, but Marino is the guy that will help you out with that.
Absolutely. And I think teams that want to get themselves into the playoffs, I'm a defense wins championships guy, just as much as I'm an eyeball test guy. I think that's why Edmonton didn't beat Florida, because they're still not quite good enough in net. They're still not quite good enough defensively. They can score goals in bunches, like banana bunches. It's crazy how many pucks they can put in the net, but you got to be able to keep them out. And that's been the knock against the Oilers for a year. Did they improve to the point this year where they were the second best team in the NHL? Absolutely, they did. Is Florida going to be worse next year? Yeah, probably, because they're going to lose guys. So Edmonton, now you want to get back to the top of that heap. I think Edmonton needs better defense. And I'm not talking about offensive guys. I'm talking about defense. That's what they need. They need better D, better goaltending.
Absolutely. Well, we still got more to get to on this episode, Tom. We're running a little bit over time based off our time schedule, but you know what? That's okay. We had a lot to unravel in this episode. We are going to talk about the actual draft. What went down for Utah? What were some of our reactions? And maybe even get some grades about that. And we'll get to all that. We still have a lot of time. We'll do that right after this.
All right. eBay Motors, passion, drive, and patience is the formula for winning championships. And it's also what keeps your ride or die alive. eBay Motors has everything you need to maintain your vehicle and level it up to peak performance. Superchargers, roof racks, exhaust kits, LED headlights, and more. Whether you're into speed, power, or style, eBay Motors has you covered. With over 122 million parts for your number one ride or die, you'll always find exactly what you're looking for. And with eBay Guaranteed Fit, your part is guaranteed to fit your ride every time or your money back. Because with eBay Motors, you're burning rubber, not cash. With all the parts you need at the prices you want, it's easy to make your car the MVP and bring home huge wins. Keep your ride or die alive at ebaymotors.com. Eligible items only. Exclusions apply. eBay Guaranteed Fit only available to U.S. customers.
Let's keep things rolling on this episode of Locked On Utah Hockey Club. Robyn Leano and Tom Callahan. I do want to remind everyone really quick to go ahead and oversubscribe to our new Insider Club. You text the number 801-760-9033. Use our promo code 750. Up until the mid next week, you guys will get 50% off your first 2 months. We got continuing on this episode, Tom. We are talking the NHL Draft, 2024 NHL Draft, Utah's first ever draft. And let's just say that they made some decisions that surprised some people, but they also, I would say, they had a pretty winning draft strategy.
Yeah, they did. And it's interesting. They went out and acquired 2 defensemen because on day one, when they picked Iginla at number 6, I thought to myself, it's interesting that they're going for a forward at number 6. Now, I have no problem with Tij Iginla. As a matter of fact, I love the pick. I think it's great. We talked about it before the draft, and I said, if the apple doesn't fall far from the tree, I'm all in. Let's do it. So, he's got just an elite shot, good hockey sense, plays with that little bit of an edge that his old man had. I mean, obviously a lot came down, to Tij from his dad. And I'll tell you what, I don't mind the pick at all, but I did wonder, I'm like, okay, they didn't go defense. I wonder why. And then, of course, they make another first-round pick. They trade to move up. And again, this is part of the Bill Armstrong. I swear he must have been told to just, hey, man, go for it. Like, just get out there and go for it. So they get back up into the first round to make another pick. And at this point, so, it's funny when you said, hey, did you see that at the time? And I didn't catch right away that they were going back up. But then another forward with Cole Bobo. I'm like, this is interesting. Okay, almost a point a game guy here. And he's big, 6'2", 209, fits the MO. But suddenly when the trades started to roll in and they're acquiring defensemen, I am seeing what they're doing here. They feel good about their forward core is exactly what the message is coming out of this. And now they're bolstering it even more down the line. Iginla might have a chance to make the team out of camp. I think at least he's going to get a look in the first 5 games or so, unless something strange happens. But honestly, so now Robyn, to me, I actually feel a lot better, and it's a lot clearer. They clearly had the strategy coming in, and we were all guessing, thinking, they're going to go defense. They have needs on defense. No, they have shifted themselves into we're making the playoffs this year mode real fast by getting current NHL defensemen on the blue line and looking at the future up front.
And you take a look at that. I want to say this really quick. I'm just glad I get to realize the dream that I had of now that you have the sons of Shane Doan and Jarome Iginla on the same team.
Yeah, you were rooting for that.
I wanted to see that so bad because that's a really cool, like, for someone again that grew up, and I mean, they were in the both of them were earlier in their careers when I was born, but then I got a chance to see them for most of their careers throughout the 2000s. All of the 2000s. So I was like, you know what? This is awesome to see that their sons are now playing on the same team in the National Hockey League. It's pretty cool. But other than that, I want to point this out, Tom. After they made the trades, they're like, okay, we still need to stockpile on D. So they go out in the next 4 picks or whatever they did after that, go out and draft 4D. and not just regular, not just for regular, just 4D, just because they're defensemen, but still following that Bill Armstrong MO of big defensive physical guys.
You got what? 6'4", 211, 6'4", 225, 6'1", 187, 6'3", 187. Yeah, no, I see where you're going with this. I mean, what? It's crazy. Oh, 6'4", 208. Sorry, I almost missed Gabe Smith in round 4. Man, yeah, no, size is the MO. And it's kind of funny because I grew up in Buffalo, New York, and I still have a lot of friends who are Sabres fans, and I'm helping them dissect their draft sadness is the only way I could put it. There's so many complaints over there about the lack of size, about the lack of physical play, about just all those things. And the Sabres are in for that franchise, historic period of ineptitude right now, as far as missing the playoffs. And, it pains me. It's my hometown. I want my friends to be happy too. I mean, I don't want them calling me complaining every single time, but that's where they are. It's not that small players don't have a place in today's NHL. They do, but they have to be exceptional, and they have to do something exceptionally well. I thought it was telling. I saw a stat: only 3 players under 5'10" were drafted, while 5 guys 6'7" were drafted. So look, size still matters in the NHL. I think coming out of the lockout and everybody saying with the obstruction rules and all this and the crackdowns, smaller guys are going to have more room on the ice. And to this day, I believe that's true. I do believe the smaller, faster player now has a much better shot at making the NHL than they did in the mid 80s. But the problem was the big players who existed then when we cracked down on all of this were the big, hulking, lumbering guys who couldn't really skate. But now
you're getting
even the 6'7" guys can skate. Yeah. So when the big guys can move and the big guys can play, why wouldn't you take 6'5" over 5'8" if the skill set is pretty much the same?
Yeah, you're absolutely right. And I feel like that's kind of what I'm glad we're seeing. You're able to get size meets skill, which is really going to help out. And again, there still is a place for those smaller guys. I think as you mentioned, there were like very, very few that were drafted who were under 5'10". I think I was listening to the broadcast when one of the guys who was 5'8" got drafted, and they were like, "Oh my God, he's 5'8". He's so small." But you look at his, but don't take his small stature for any granted, because this dude can skate. He's incredibly skillful. Kept putting on what makes him good.
And there's something to do with being strong on your skates too.
Mm-hmm.
If you're strong on your skates, it doesn't matter what size you are.
Plus, let's just put it. I mean, if you are a smaller player, you might benefit a little bit extra at that face-off. Get a little bit.
Well, yeah, you get low.
Get a little bit lower.
Get in there. But I mean, and you know what? That is a thing. Like if you're able to get low on your skates, use your leg drive, you can get under some of the bigger defensemen and still drive to the net. But again, it's all that strength of your skating. It's the strength of your leg drive. Do you have that lower body, that core strength, that usable strength? I'm not talking about the guys who look pretty. I'm talking about the ones who can actually push off when the time calls for it. And there's nothing saying if you're 5'8" that you don't have that, but you must work to develop it.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Anything else specifically on like your initial thoughts about Utah before I move on and talk about maybe overarching things, take maybe a look at around the NHL and give us some thoughts around there?
I like the direction of the draft. I like that. I think Bill Armstrong did a nice job balancing aggressive moves with maintaining the cupboard for the future. So I think it was a nice balance. I think this was a very good, very successful draft for Utah. They stayed big. They stayed within their parameters. There's skill all over the place these days. I like the moves they made, and they weren't afraid to. And here's the other thing they have the luxury of, really. It's funny, Robyn, you said it earlier, like, oh, Coyotes fans might say this. And Coyotes fans may follow this team to Utah, and I hope you do. I hope if you're listening and you're a Coyotes fan that you are able to take some solace in Utah moving, but I know there's a lot who don't. I know there's a lot hoping that the team flames out every time. But I get that. That's fine. That's sports. But the point is, that's not your fan base anymore.
Mm-hmm.
It's now Utah.
You reminded me of one thing. I'm going to say this before I want to say this before we get onto the kind of the rest of the scope of things. Did you already hear when Ryan Smith went up to the mic to announce the pick?
Got booed right away.
They got booed right away, yep. And he's
rivalry
like, "We haven't even played a game yet."
Yep, rivalry is on.
That Vegas Utah rivalry is going to be fun. I'm already feeling it. I'm already loving it.
Yeah. By the way, the whole point of me saying all that stuff about Coyotes and Utah fans, the whole point is Utah's the fan base now, so there are no allegiances. These fans don't have favorites. They will moving forward, but as of right now, if you're going to get rid of anybody and everybody that you want to, this is the time to do it because not a jersey has been sold yet.
Exactly.
Absolutely. Except for maybe spicy tuna. There might be some spicy tuna pre-orders.
Probably. Anyways,
absolutely, there should be.
We still got more to get to on this episode of Locked On Utah Hockey Club. We're going to get some thoughts about the rest of the NHL and the draft, and maybe even pick up and see if we can get a grade for Utah. Because I'm kind of curious what your thought is, Tom. We'll get that right after this. And today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. I love sports. I love them so much. I never want them to stop. But as the playoffs wind down, we get fewer games, and the sports just aren't sportsing like I want them to. FanDuel lets me keep the sports going whenever I want. All I have to do is open the app and dream up bets at any time I'm in the mood. And this summer, FanDuel is hooking up all customers with a boost or a bonus daily. That's right. There's something for everybody every day, all summer long. I know you might want to go already into futures on who is going to win next year's Stanley Cup. You know, that is one of my favorite things to do at around this time of year. You can do that too. So head on over to FanDuel.com/lockedon. Start making the most out of your summer. FanDuel, official betting partner of Major League Baseball. All right, let's keep things going on this episode of Locked On Utah Hockey Club. Tom, before I want to get to that overarching things, do you have a grade in mind for Utah yet? An early grade? I know it's early, but
you know what? It is early, and of course, true draft grades are 5 years from now.
Oh, 100%.
We will really judge this grade, but here's why I think I can apply a little bit more realistic grade to the impact of now, the trades. I think those trades have an impact of now. And I think Iginla can have an impact of potentially now, especially when you're picking 6. It's important not to miss if you possibly can.
Mm-hmm.
I like what they did. Those middle 4 picks, they basically bulked up on D, and then they stayed big. They did not pick a goalie, which I'm okay with. I don't mind drafting goaltenders, but I feel like the goaltender market in the NHL right now, number one, they're not too worried because their guys are a little bit younger, and it clearly shows the confidence they have in the current pair. But I also feel like, and we'll talk about this closer to free agency, I have a couple surprise names that I think could be in the hat, especially in light of some of the trades and the movement. But here's the other thing that I like. They stayed with their blueprint. They've not been in a hurry the whole time, and the team has been steadily improving. But now that the ability to make moves was there, use the cap space, I really think this is a B+ immediate reaction for me on this draft. I hesitate to give anybody an A. I think it's real hard to give anybody, maybe the Sharks, just because they got Celebrini. That's an A. Okay, good job.
They got Celebrini and Dickinson. So
right. So I mean, they had a really nice draft, but they had to be really, really bad to do it. I think Utah, this is the last year they're going to be in a position to even be 6th. This team has now gone into a playoff position, in my opinion. And so I think that's why the B+. I'm not quite squeaking it to an A just yet.
You're rightfully giving being a little bit conservative there because you know that this team is going to have better expectations. So you're going to be like, this is where around where I think they are now, but they have the potential to, get squeak up, or depending on what these players do down the road, which is again a really good idea to do. But you're right, there are very few teams that can very deserve an A to A plus or anywhere in that range. You mentioned the Sharks as a winner. Any other winners in this draft, that you would consider like, hey, this team had a pretty darn good draft?
That's actually a good one. It's interesting. Some teams, just because teams had a lot of picks doesn't necessarily mean they did awesome. Although you look at a team like Dallas comes out with 3 guys. I don't think they did very well, picking with 3 guys. I kind of like what the Wild did because I didn't think they were going to pick up Booyam at 12. That was a shock. I didn't think he'd be that far down the line. And so, I mean, just looking in the division, I was a little surprised the Avs went for a goalie first. That was a bit of a surprise to me. That one I wasn't sure. I don't know Nashville's draft class. I'm kind of up in the air about, St. Louis, I think, was middle of the road. Winnipeg also had fewer players to pick from. So I don't really know that I'm all in on their draft class. You know who I liked? I was thinking about this earlier, and I know they've been under a lot of pressure, but Montreal, I like what Montreal did. They got Demidov, which is crazy at number 5. I think that's awesome. I think he's going to be an impact guy. And here's the crazy thing is last year, they kind of blew it, right? They didn't this year. So I think they kind of got some guys that they needed. They had 2 picks in the first round. They got Michael Haig. I like him. And I think he's dealt with a lot, in his personal life. And the other thing that was fun was Etos Koivu, Saku's kid. So that's a nice little to the fans right there. A little tip of the cap. So I think it's good. I think they restocked. So I like what Montreal did.
Yeah, absolutely. I want to add one more winner, not a team that was technically a winner, but a player who is a winner, just based off the kids' reaction to getting drafted. Because I always love kids' reactions.
Oh yes, I know where you're going.
Beckett Seneca, just like, oh my god, that made me happy for that kid.
That was the most wholesome F-bomb of all time. He was totally shocked, and it was the best. I'm like, he's my new favorite player, like just because of how surprised he was to go 3rd. And it just was, what an awesome moment. And look, I know even the reaction of most people that he went 3rd was that, but you know what? I mean, if Anaheim believes in the player and they reach for him, and I mean, good for them. I mean, they had a bunch of high picks, and they jumped in on it. I mean, the Ducks are stocked but young. So I think for them, it's going to be a little while to reach. But boy, who could not love that? And I'm glad you brought that up, Robyn, because that is absolutely what this game is all about.
It reminds me a little bit, and again, it's a little bit different, but there was an extracurricular when this one happened. But when Maverick Maru got drafted by the Arizona Coyotes a few years back, where you could see he had an incredibly happy reaction. He loved that he got drafted in the first round, but then it got overshadowed a little bit by his parents having a very intense moment, I should say.
That's funny.
But
I'd actually forgotten about that until you mentioned it.
Oh, that was certainly something. But Maverick Maru himself had like a surprising reaction. He did not expect to get drafted in the first round, and that was late first round too. He's like, "Oh my goodness, what the?" And he had he had a time for himself with that as well. So.
But it was not quite a Seneca-esque reaction.
It was not quite a Seneca-esque reaction. That's kind of why I had to bring it up as a like adjacent, but oh my god, yeah, Seneca. That's a true reaction right there.
That was fantastic. It was absolutely my favorite moment of the whole draft.
So anything else from this draft I mentioned that we haven't mentioned we should probably bring up?
Some of the other moves, the Capitals are reshuffling, the Tampa Bay Lightning are reshuffling. The East is going to look completely different here in the next little bit. I think once we get into free agency and we start to see that with the deals at the draft, man, Logan Thompson is a stud, an absolute stud. I think the Golden Knights traded the wrong guy. And I say that with all due respect to Aiden Hill. I watched Aiden in the Coyotes organization. I know a lot of folks watching and listening this podcast are familiar with him. I mean, the guy won a cup, right? But so did Logan Thompson. And I think Thompson is absolute stud. The Capitals have been questionable in net, but now Vegas has outlined what they're going to do. They have a clear, number one, number two structure. And no, I'm going to save that take. I'll save that take. I have one other hot take in the goaltending market. I'm going to save it.
You and I were saying off mic earlier, I want to mention it too, like because Logan Thompson was out signing autographs at Sphere outside the draft, and there was a line for him to watch, and someone made the comment, is someone gonna tell him, because it would happen while this trade happened while he was out signing autographs, and I'm like, yep, someone's gonna tell him. Like, oh my god, I feel bad for him at that moment.
Yeah, finding out from a fan in the line. I mean, that's, boy, I mean, yeah, you're going to find out at some point. But in the meantime, I mean, a good kid and a great hockey player. And I wish him all the success in Washington. I think they really upgraded their goaltending with that move. So good for them.
Absolutely. Well, we still got, more to unravel. Unfortunately, we don't have enough time on this episode. Tomorrow, a heads up, we will have our Hockey 101 free agency episode that will be coming out. If you guys ever want to learn what are the ins and outs of free agency and kind of want to know what goes into a contract, we'll have that releasing tomorrow morning. But Monday morning, we will have a preview. Early Monday morning, we'll have a preview going into the free agency. That's when we really dump into a lot more stuff that we've been hearing over the weekend, Tom. And we'll certainly have a lot to get to as we get ready for the first opening of free agency for the Utah Hockey Club.
I'm excited. I can't wait. I am so fired up. I'm fired up coming out of the draft. I'm fired up going into free agency. Let's go.
Let's get right to it. But that's going to be it for this episode of the Locked On Utah Hockey Club podcast. If you like what you heard, don't forget to leave a review. Drop us a like, a comment, subscribe if you have yet to already. We're available everywhere you get your podcasts, including on YouTube, SiriusXM, ad-free on Amazon Music. And again, don't forget to join our Insider Club. We get some exclusive content. In fact, with this one-on-one, once again, all you got to do is send a text to 801-760-9033 to get started. Use the promo code SUMMER50 on sign-up. 50% off your first 2 months. Don't forget to interact with us on social media as well. We are on Facebook, facebook.com/LockedOnNHL in Utah, and on Twitter, also now known as X, Instagram, and Threads, all there at LO_NHL Utah. I'm personally at Robyn_Leonio. Tom Callahan is at Callahan on Air. Interact with us, ask the question. We might answer right back or on a future episode of the Locked On Utah Hockey Club podcast. Thanks again, everyone, for listening to today's episode, and we'll see you guys next time.